Hey, Wes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kathryn.
Okay, great. I
Can you
was
hear me?
starting to wonder.
I'm not getting any sound.
I can hear you, James, or Wes, I don't.
There we go. And now I'm getting sound.
There you are.
Let's try this again.
Love your hair, Layla.
Okay, sound.
Thank you. I do too.
You wouldn't happen to be astrologically, would you happen to be a Leo?
I am not. I am an Aries.
Okay. Because Leos always have something going on with their hair.
Oh.
So it's a good guess.
Yeah. As soon as I found out that like I didn't have to have normal colored hair for my job anymore, I was like, all right, bye, going to the hair salon.
Is that a new thing?
Hmm.
Is that a new thing?
There was like I asked I saw someone else in the district had some, like, not like, it wasn't as crazy as this, it was just like a streak. And I asked my principal last year and he was like, I don't think there's anything written, because I like went through the whole like grooming section of our of our stuff, and I was like, it doesn't say anything. Plus it says like if you have a good reason, and I think being a theater teacher is a good reason. So
An
That's right, 'cause
example
had-
to your students of individuality.
exactly.
You had was a blue for a while, I think. Yeah.
I had like all blue. I've done all pink. I've done blue and purple, turquoise and purple, and now I'm like in a pink and a purple. That's like the purple's refusing to go away, but it's going to go away.
Like a magenta. I like it.
Thanks.
Do your students have suggestions? Do they offer suggestions of what they like?
Yeah, I did. I think it was 2 or 3 dives ago. I had like 3 that I couldn't choose between, and so I put it up as like a classroom poll, and I had all my classes vote. That's when
Well,
I
you
went
should-
all blue.
You should have a contest if they score a high, they all pass the CLEP test or whatever the test is, Okay.
Yeah, they get to pick that class.
They get to pick the color, yes.
That would be fun.
I'm down with that. Hey,
Camera keeps
Clayton.
not realizing I exist.
I know, I noticed that.
Hello. How is everybody today?
Very good. How are you?
I'm tired. Yeah, that's it.
So am I, and it's only Tuesday.
It never stops. It's just another day. There's no breaks.
Well, I hate to tell you, but the older you get, the faster time goes.
Yeah.
You think it's bad now, just wait.
Great. That's good encouragement.
Well, it beats the alternative.
Yeah.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. I had a nice week off. I went to New York City last week, so it was great.
Nice.
I lived in New York for about almost 6 years on the
Oh, what
upper.
part were you in?
Cool.
It was great.
I
What part of the
bet.
city did you live in, Kathryn?
I lived on the Upper West Side, right at 90.
Me too.
and
I was there
Broadway.
for 2 years. I was on 81st and Central Park West.
Okay, and I was not too far, 94th and Broadway, so right on the 2 train line.
Gotcha. The what was my beloved? The oh, it was the blue line. I can't think of the letters now, but that was the stop right outside mine.
Yeah, the closer you live to a subway stop in New York, the higher the rent is.
I didn't realize how spoiled I was by that until like I would visit some friends and it would be like a 10-minute walk from the subway stop to their place.
Yeah.
I heard it was rainy up there in New York last week though. My sister-in-law was up there too, actually.
Yeah, I left before the rain got there, thankfully.
Nice.
But it was just great. I stayed right by Bryant Park. And I used to go, my best friend lives in Brooklyn, and I used to go twice a year, but I hadn't been in 5 years. So it was good to be back.
My office was right next to Bryant Park when I worked up
Okay.
there, and it was like we would do lunch there most days. You know, grab something, go sit in the park and eat, and it was awesome.
The best at Bryant Park is at Christmas time, and in the middle of
Yes,
Christmas time is just fantastic in Bryant Park.
I love their Christmas market.
So, Kathryn, where do you live now?
I live in Texarkana now. I moved from New
Oh,
York
okay.
and moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was in Charlotte for over 10 years, but my family's in Texarkana, so my husband and I relocated back here a little over a year ago. So it's been a big adjustment.
Oh, yeah.
I think Texarkana is where people who live in New York move for witness protection. I don't think anybody voluntarily comes from New York to Texarkana. That's
I keep telling my sisters, I have 2 sisters, and they're both in Rotary. As a matter of fact, the Texarkana International Rotary Club is probably one of the only clubs in the country, or maybe even the world, that has 3 sisters in the club. But I told my sisters, and I remind them all the time, you are the only reason I am here. The only reason is my family, because they're nowhere else. So that's why I have to be here. I wish they were in New York.
It's a fun place, but it's very different than living down here.
Very different.
That was my thing. It was like, this is fun, but I'm a little homesick.
Well, I can only do, I say, about 3 nights and 4 days. And then my attitude starts to change and I start to get a little bristly and I just kind of get grouchy. And so it's about a 3.5, 4 day thing. And then I'm ready to come back to the kinder, gentler world of the South.
Yeah, plus New York takes all your money too.
Got that right.
That was part of what really got me thinking about moving back, is because I was actually talking to some people at RILA one year and realized that I was paying double in rent for my 600 square foot studio what they were paying for a 3-bedroom mortgage.
Oh, wow.
My mortgage was cheaper when I moved to Charlotte, to like a 3,600 square foot house versus my 700 square foot apartment in New York. It was like $2,000 cheaper. I mean, a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
Oh my
it's
goodness.
unreal.
But
Hey, Madeline. Hey, Andrew.
Hello.
We'll give just a couple more minutes for people to hop on. Sarah Jenkins, gonna be just a little late. She's on her way home from the gym. And then we are going to, hopefully Legacy will jump on here because we're going to induct her tonight. Yay. But I cannot wait to hear. Kathryn, I actually got to go to the Texarkana International Club last week. And so I was like, hey, I met your sister.
Oh, and I wasn't there. That was,
I know.
I had to work late. I work at Texas A&M and we have student events all the time. So I had a student event that I had to go to.
It was really funny. They didn't end up having, their speaker had backed out, and I am also the RILA admin coordinator. And so I ended up talking all about RILA. And then I talked about our club and how excited I was to meet you the week before that. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm so sorry I missed that.
It was very impromptu. I was like, I guess I can talk 30 minutes about this.
Has anyone heard from the Sterneman duo lately? I haven't seen them in a bit.
I haven't had a chance to reach out. Well, Wes, so again, welcome, Kathryn. We'll go ahead and get started. We're so excited to have you back, and I can't wait to hear all about what you're going to talk about the DEI. Wes, would you like to go ahead and start our introductions?
Well, of course, of course. Let me tell you how I approach this topic, okay? I have alluded to this a few times. I think I'm the oldest guy in the group. You can tell by the gray hair and fading hairline. But brilliant smarts that come with age, only with age, come with experience. So, but I belong to 2 other clubs in Rotary. And Rotary is like a lot of organizations that have the Lions, the Optimist Club, what are some of the service clubs? The
Kiwanis.
Kiwanis, Shriners. Founded mostly by men, mostly white men, many years ago, many decades ago, and over time the society has changed, but the clubs have not. And so many of these clubs have aged and shrunk in membership and appeal to other people who might otherwise join. The careers, the technology, everything's changed. And some far-sighted people in Rotary began realizing this quite some time ago, a couple decades ago, began slowly trying to turn Rotary toward a more inclusive, embracing organization. After all, it's got international in its name. And that, like any sort of change, there are some people who are all for it and some people who are not comfortable with change. They like things as they are. I was a member of 2 clubs and 2 chapters in Tyler. Fabulous men and women, just wonderful. The last club was 70. I kept the stats, so I knew 75% male. I think that's right, 75% male, and 1/3 of the club was over 80. No, 1/3 of the club was over 70. 20% was over 80, and we had I think 3 African Americans. We had one who was Hindu and native of Africa and India, and we had no Muslims, and very not a representative group that met at a country club and was just happy with the way things were. And so this is one of the challenges of any organization, whether it's a corporation or a nonprofit or a government agency, is how does a leader change the character of the organization, the DNA of the organization, to be more successful. And that's what great leaders do. Great leaders can look into the future, not just the present. They think, how does the organization need to change and adapt in order to be successful in the future to accomplish its strategic objectives? And so we can applaud Rotary International for seeing ahead and what needed to change and charting a way toward change by slowly building the conversation, the images, the wording, the dialogue toward change and inclusiveness that is essential for the club to survive. Some people, many people, most people in Rotary embrace that. I travel all over the world. I go to Rotary clubs, and I find that people are very open-minded and very embracing of diversity. Some people are not, and we see that in our district. Our district is conservative, and all of you know that if you've had experience in East Texas, and many of you live in Texas, or you've been in other parts of the country that are quite conservative, and these are wonderful people. They have views that are correct, that there is value in stability and consistency and some of our basic values as Americans and as humans, and those core values are important and should be preserved. But at the same time, there is change that needs to be taken that can embrace how other people see the world, in that embracing someone's differences, their uniqueness, is not a compromise of our own values. And this is where some of the members in the clubs I belong to struggle. They think that accepting people who are different is a compromise of their religious values or political values. And so they reject it. And so what we are trying to do is have a conversation that leads people in a way that they're comfortable, embracing the change, that everyone is unique, everyone has something to give, everyone should be included. And as long as they adhere to the 4 basic principles of being a Rotarian that we end every meeting with. And so I invited Kathryn to come speak with us because she's uniquely qualified. And I'm going to summarize a few things. You already know a basic. She's from North Carolina, from Charlotte. Beautiful place. I lived in North Carolina for a summer, and it's beautiful. Texarkana is a lovely town too. I've run the half marathon several times through the city. So great community. She has a bachelor's in journalism from the University of North Texas in Denton. She is an Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Is that right? I got that right. You're right. Alpha Kappa Alpha. Okay. All right. And a few other. She's a certified diversity professional. I learned something already. I did not know there was such a thing as a certified diversity professional. And I'm going to skip a few things, but she works most importantly for our purposes as the director for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging at Texas A&M, Texarkana. So I graduated from a fine school in the banks of the Brazos River down in College Station. And so anything with Texas A&M gets my full support. And she also is a professional. She knows how to do this. She is a leader in this area. And so she's, as you know, very committed to her family, moved all the way across the country to the fine city of Texarkana to be closer to her sisters and reminds them of that apparently periodically. And she's a member of the Texarkana International Rotary Club, which is a great name to have an organization, International Rotary Club of Rotary International. You'd say it twice. So obviously very well integrated. And as she speaks to us, I want her to begin though by telling what I think is the most interesting thing I see on this summary. The Annie T. Doe Memorial Foundation, which operates the Annie T. Doe Academy for Impoverished Students in Buchanan, Liberia, West Africa. And so I want you to talk with us. I want everybody to give a warm Rotary welcome for Kathryn to talk to us about DEI, but I'm going to also ask Kathryn, tell us about this fascinating organization before you get into the nuts and bolts of DEI. We've got to hear that.
Well, you know, I love Annie T. Doe Memorial Foundation, so I'm always glad to talk about it. Annie T. Doe Memorial Foundation was founded in 2011 by a woman that I used to work with. Her name is Saya Sio, and she was raised in Liberia, West Africa, but she came to the United States to go to college. At 14, she lost her mother, and her mother's name was Annie T. Doe. So Saya, it was many, many years after she left Liberia that she went back to her hometown. That was after a 14-year Liberian civil war. And what she found was that, you know, the place where she grew up and you know, lived for many years before she came to the United States was just devastated by the impacts of the war. And so after that visit, she came back to the US and decided to start the Annie T. Doe Foundation, basically with 3 different principles. Number 1, providing an education to the impoverished children in that community who had no access to education. Number 2, women's empowerment programs. A lot of women had lost their spouses due to Ebola, due to the Civil War and other epidemics in Africa, so the empowering women, and then also basic health care. So those were the 3 principles that the Annie T. Doe Memorial Foundation was founded on. We started in 2011 with 75 kids in grades K through 4. And through this year in 2022, we've expanded each year, and we now have 432 students in grades K through 9. And we just completed a fundraiser on September 17th of this year to raise money to complete a high school. If we don't build a high school, the kids won't have access to education after the 9th grade. So I've been involved as a member of the board for many years now. I think I've lost count since like 2015. My love is supporting the children at the school. They're fantastic. They're bright. They're smart. They speak a lot of languages. They are very astute when it comes to the Bible. It's a Christian-based education. And so I'm just excited to be a part of it. And Wes, you know, I could talk about Annie Doe forever, but I won't. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, put a link in the chat, and
I will do that.
We'd like to see more about this. I'll bet some of our members would be glad to support something like that.
It only costs $300 to support one child for an entire academic year. One of the most important things we do is provide daily nutrition at lunch for those children. And because that's really many times the only meal they will receive that day. It's heartbreaking that some of the students will take their lunch to the fence and try to share it with their brothers and sisters who don't have access to the school because we are at capacity until we continue to build, but they share their lunch with their brothers and sisters. So what we're doing is really important. And our motto is empowering today's generation for a better tomorrow. And that's what we try to do every day. So I did put the website link, netdomemorialfoundation.org. And so check it out. It's a great organization.
Very good. Well, talk to us about DEI. How is it going to be a benefit to Rotary? How can we be better people?
Well, first I'd like to share my screen. And if you could give me permission to do that, that'd be great.
Should be good now. I always forget I have to turn that on.
All right, here we go. Okay, now, thank you, Wes, for that lovely introduction. Again, I have been a DEI professional for a number of years. In my previous role, I worked with clients in higher education to develop diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for their faculty and staff. So I've been in and around DEI for a while, and I really know the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so tonight, I just wanted to share some of those concepts with you. Sometimes people don't really know what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. So the first thing I'll do is to really go over what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually means in the context of Rotary, and then talk a little bit about what Rotary offers to help us learn and educate us on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I'll answer any questions that you have. So we'll get started by just underscoring that Rotary is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. They put together a task force to really study diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they came up with a code of conduct and some principles that they suggest that we all follow in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It asks us only very simply to be respectful and use respectful language. Rotary International asks us to be supportive of our groups, our clubs, and each other. Rotary asks us to foster a welcoming and inclusive environment. And lastly, they ask us to celebrate diversity. Now, I don't think that anyone could really argue that those principles are not important. I think those are principles that we should aspire to do in our everyday life. But like Wes said, there are some people who hear the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they think about concepts that really Rotary nor me as an industry professional really mean when we talk about diversity. It does not mean giving up your values, whether they be political or religious or just personally held beliefs, in order to welcome and be respectful and supportive of others. So in the context of DEI, our code of conduct is very simple, and it is not something that is should be a threatening concept to anyone. So when we mention diversity, equity, and inclusion, what does that really mean? Well, diversity is basically representation. It's having people of all backgrounds, life experiences, and identities who can come together regardless of their age, their ethnicity, their race, their sexual orientation, their religion, or gender. But it also includes an infinite range of other dimensions. I think a lot of times we focus on diversity based on the characteristics of individuals that we can see. We can see color, we can see gender, but there are many, many dimensions of diversity that you can't see. For example, diversity of thought, geographical diversity. I think I grew very much as an individual, my perspectives and my learnings by living in New York City. So someone who was raised in the South, who's never really traveled to New York and other places, they may have very different ideas and opinions than someone who may have been exposed to many different cultures. So geographical diversity is also a dimension. So when we put all of those characteristics together, the benefit of diversity is better problem solving, more innovative and creative ideas. It helps us to have more creative problem solving, and it creates opportunities to not only notice differences, but to also uncover similarities. A lot of times people don't think they have things in common with someone else. One of the examples that I have is that there was an American Indian employee, and she was paired in a project with a guy from the South. And he was a white guy, middle-aged, not sure that a young Indian American woman would have very much in common with a white middle-aged male from the South. But as they got to talking to each other, they noticed the differences right off the bat. But once they started talking to each other, they realized that they had a lot of things in common. For example, both were raised on a farm. So they started to talk about getting up early and the demands of taking care of animals, and all of those experiences that growing up on a farm were very similar, even though she grew up outside of the country and he grew up in the South. They found that they had more in common than what might meet the eye. So diversity includes all of that. And it's really important, like I said, for creative problem solving and for innovation. So that's the definition of diversity. I think equity is a little bit harder to explain. Equity is really considering how to provide differing levels of support, opportunities, and resources so that our participants in Rotary would have a welcoming and productive experience. Now at work, when we talk about equity, we talk about some of the systemic policies and procedures that are not equitable across individuals who should be treated equitably, or in this, I call them similarly situated. That could be gender differences in pay. That could be policies and procedures that discriminate against those who are not able-bodied. For example, you may have a job description that says you must have a driver's license, but if the job doesn't require driving, someone with a disability may not be able to apply, when really what that job description means is that you must have your own transportation. So we have to go and look at policies and procedures and structures that are barriers to similarly situated people having similar outcomes. Sometimes we know that there are inequities just based on the outcome alone. In colleges and universities, minority students have a much lower success rate of graduation than white students, and that's due to a number of reasons. But based on the outcomes, because we do know that intelligence is not your race or your gender or your ethnicity is not a determinator of your intelligence, then we look to the outcomes that students of color have less successful outcomes than white students. So taking apart all of the elements that contribute to student success and evaluating those elements to remove any of the inequities that cause disparate outcomes. So sometimes the policy or the procedure is not clear, but the outcome makes it clear that there are built-in inequities. So inequity in the context of DEI just means carefully studying what we do to make sure that there are no outcomes, intended or unintended, that do not equally benefit all individuals and put similarly situated people in the same situation. Inclusion is a little bit easier to define, but probably a little bit harder to obtain. Diversity, basically, you can just go invite and bring in a whole number of different people. You can invite Black people and gay people and Muslims into the club, and voila, you have diversity. But what is likely to happen if we don't have inclusion is that those people will not stay. They won't be committed to becoming a member, and one day they'll just stop showing up, because inclusion is creating an experience where the diversity that we want, that people feel welcomed, respected, and valued. And it allows people to bring their whole authentic self into Rotary and know that they will be valued and respected. So inclusion is very important. Diversity can be achieved through quotas and other laws or whatever. You can always achieve diversity. We've been trying to do that since the 70s. But inclusion, now we've kind of gotten it, that inclusion is really where the rubber meets the road in not only attracting diverse individuals, but also creating an atmosphere where they feel that they belong. So I'll share this illustration with you that I don't know if how many of you have ever seen this before. Have you guys seen this before?
I was actually thinking about this when you were talking about equity.
Well, this is a great illustration, and it's actually one that's a little different than the one that I've seen. For those of you who haven't seen it, this means that equity doesn't always mean equal. And in the first equation, everyone is treated equally, even though they don't all start in the same place. We have a little short guy, maybe he's a kid, but I think he's a short guy, and a tall guy and someone in the middle. But because of equality, the short person can't look over the fence and watch what I've termed a baseball game. I don't know what they're doing, but I call it a baseball game. It looks more like golf now that I look at it. But anyway, equality would indicate that we treat everyone exactly the same. When you look at equity, it acknowledges that we don't all have the same capabilities, that sometimes we have to make differences in what we offer and what we do for people in order to just put them in a similar situation. So in this case, the little short guy, as I call him, is able to see the game just like the other two individuals are, based on the equitable treatment rather than equal treatment. The reality is that we don't all start in the same place. I always mention that in Texas, our school revenue is tied to property taxes. So if you are unfortunate enough to be raised in a low-income community, or even a community that doesn't have a high percentage of home ownership, your revenue into your neighborhood school will be lower than those individuals who live in multi-million-dollar houses in what some people might call better neighborhoods. So this third illustration just really acknowledges that the reality is that we don't all start in the same place. And sometimes we do have to make differences to treat people equitably. And the fourth illustration, that one was new to me, as have been doing research on DEI for a long time. I had never run across this particular illustration. Can anybody tell me what they see that's different about this one?
The barriers have completely been removed.
That's exactly right. And that's really what we want in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is that we remove all barriers so that everyone, despite where they started or where they, their own personal traits, that there are no barriers, that everyone can enjoy and experience the same thing without barriers. But equity doesn't always mean equal. As Les mentioned, my role at Texas A&M Texarkana is the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. And although Rotary does not really include the word belonging in our policies, I think it's important for us to know what belonging means. In this context, belonging is an organization that engages the full potential of the individual, where innovation thrives and views and beliefs and values are integrated. Diversity is what you do. You go and bring in a diverse group of people. Equity is why you do it. You want everyone to have the same opportunities to, I guess, watch the baseball game in the previous analogy. Inclusion is how you do it. It's how you welcome people, how you treat them, how they feel respected, how they feel seen, heard, and acknowledged for who they are and what they bring to the table. And I like to say that belonging is the outcome. So when someone says, and they come to Rotary for the first time, they get to know all of you, and they get to know what you do, and they see that your values are similar to their values. That's where you create an atmosphere of belonging. And I think the best thing that we could hope for is that a member of Rotary says, I go to Rotary and I know that that is a place where I belong. So belonging is kind of new to the conversation, but it is the result when we are diligent in attracting diversity. We're diligent in creating equity and making sure that the outcomes for individuals are similar, and inclusion is how we do that. Hopefully that person will be able to make the statement that Rotary is a place where I belong. So why does diversity matter in Rotary? I thought Wes was going to tell my whole presentation up front, because he alluded to many of the statistics that have driven Rotary International to really undertake a very aggressive DEI stance, and it's why diversity matters. In Rotary International, 69% of our Rotary members are men, and only 29% of our Rotary members are women. If you compare that to Rotaract is about 51% women and 49% men. So Rotaract has discovered, I guess, the secret sauce in gender diversity, because they have about equal numbers. At the rate that we're going, it would take the year 2050 until Rotary International achieved gender parity, where we had similar numbers of men and women. And I don't think we want to wait that long. So that's why it's important that we take actions now, like Wes mentioned early on. Another reason why diversity matters in Rotary is because the average age of our Rotary Club members is 61. Now, there's nothing wrong with being 61. That is an average age, which means we do have members that are younger than 61, myself included. But that is I guess a high age for membership, because those members are getting older, which means that they are less likely to be able to take part in as many service and other Rotary projects and travel and leadership positions. So if we don't start to attract younger individuals, eventually that average age will continue to rise. So it's important that we focus on diversity of age as well as gender in Rotary. The leadership of Rotary International, this statistic surprised me. 96% of our senior leaders in Rotary International are over age 60, and 76% of our regional leaders are over age 60. A lot of that is because Rotary leadership can be time consuming. And I've heard people say, well, the only way you can take leadership roles in Rotary is if you're retired. And that's why the average age is so high. I would challenge that that's true, but I would also challenge Rotary International to simplify so that others can take advantage of leadership opportunities and not have to wait until they're retired to have the bandwidth or the resources to be leadership in Rotary. Does that statistic surprise anybody?
Figured it would be high. I didn't think it would be that high.
I know, that's pretty high. It surprised me as well. 96%. That's a pretty high number. So
Well,
that's why.
I'll speak out of turn on that. Go back one slide, yes. I mean, we see that in our own district. I mean, we've had excellent leaders, wonderful leaders. We have, I think, the individual who's been selected to be our district governor in 2025, 26 is the first one to be under 50, I think.
That's Landon.
I believe, I don't know his name. I believe that's right. He's from the Athens Club, but I believe he's 46 years old. And so he's the first one under, he may be 42, but he's the first one under 50 that I'm aware of. So, okay. So it's a step forward in a way.
Absolutely. We need more Landons. Everybody be like Landon. So the next thing I would just like to do is to call your attention to some resources that you may or may not know that are available on the Rotary website. They have put a very robust set of resources online to help us learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also resources to help us learn how to attract new members. And when we talk about diversity, again, we're not just talking about race, gender, religion, and sexual identity. We're talking about age. We're talking about geographic and those other elements of diversity as well. So Rotary, on their website, they have a series of short videos. This is not all of them, but they do have videos on unconscious bias. I think that's a place where in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we should all start, is realizing that we do have biases and learn tools that we can use to circumvent those biases when we have to make decisions. There are videos on holding each other accountable for creating an inclusive environment and building bridges. That is really growing the membership of Rotary and the importance of growing Rotary. So those are just some short videos. I can put the link to the video in the chat, and if I could copy it. I'll come back to it and put that in the chat. But if all of you go to your My Rotary account, you can just search diversity and you'll see all of these resources that we're talking about. There are also resources at myrotary.org. And you can take these classes through the Go Learn app. You can download it on your iPhone or your Android phone. And they're called Membership Learning Center programs. These really focus on new membership and recognizing the need for diversity, and then having tools and resources to help you attract and create positive experiences for new members. There's a flyer out there for new members. If you have new people coming into your club, that really just go over what Rotary International is all about. And really resources on how to create an inclusive culture. So I would encourage you, if you have not been to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion site within the Rotary website, I encourage you to do that. This is just a small sampling of the resources that they have. They have tons of videos, tons of the Learning Center programs, even downloadable PDFs that you can use to educate yourself and others around DEI. So I would encourage you to do that, because it will really provide you with resources to move forward with your goals to have a more diverse and inclusive environment. So we want Rotary to be a place where everyone feels that they belong, recognizing that we all have differences, but also having opportunities to share the ways that we're similar. And that is the way that we will turn some of those statistics around by welcoming individuals who may not know what Rotary is all about, but that have a heart for service. And that's a similarity that we all share, is that we have a heart for service. And I say that Rotary is more attraction, not promotion, because attraction is why people stay. Promotion may be why they come, but attraction is why they stay. And so we want Rotary to be that place where everyone feels that they can belong. So that's it for me. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have or entertain any comments that you have as well. Quiet.
I think the thing that really stood out to me, I guess, was inclusion. And I mean, I've heard, DEI as an acronym, and it's, especially I think becoming more of a thing in the corporate world, but I am a woman in tech, so that is a very, very male dominated field. So obviously diversity is something that we talk about a lot, but I think putting it in terms of inclusion puts into words something that I have been trying to explain, that I have experienced a lot, which is, okay, it's great that we're trying to build out the diversity of our teams, but I mean, I've told someone just in my job the other day, I'm like, part of me wants more women on this team just so I can have someone to spend time with when we do happy hours, so I don't have to go try to be one of the guys again for a night. And it's like, I don't think I realized how much that inclusion was kind of missing in a way until there was a word to put to it. And I'm like, yes, that is what I've been trying to explain. So I'm, and like I said, I've heard it said of, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've just never thought about, I guess, what that inclusion specifically meant. So I appreciate that I now have that in my tool bag.
Well, great. I'm glad you do too. Inclusion diversity without inclusion it's not as successful as we might think it might be. Any other comments or observations? Elaine made my day.
Kathryn, I wanted to thank you for your presentation. So I work as a meteorologist for the Weather Service, and right now we're starting something called service equity, which is, we've historically, we send out the same message and everybody's receiving it differently. And I mean, you could take Hurricane Ian as an example of that just last week. And what we're trying to do now is, try to spend more time focusing on reaching out to underrepresented communities and, know that the message has to be tailored for the group that we're talking to. And we're using the same graphic, but what was interesting is they don't have the reality part and the liberation one. So I was like, this is way more accurate, this graphic. But even within our agency, and it's just like the comment about the tech industry. I mean, we've done a horrible job diversifying and hiring, and especially the management group that I overlook, which is heavier in science. I think in our whole agency, we have less than 5 females out of maybe 100 positions. And we're looking at everything, even like the way the jobs are announced. Because with the government jobs, they ask multiple choice questions, and anybody's going to be scared away by them. They're just so intimidating. So Anyway, but our agency has a long way to go. But I just appreciate your presentation. I didn't realize that Rotary was that skewed. I knew my club in San Diego was pretty even between male and female, and the average age was definitely a little bit younger than that. And they started after this court case, I guess. But I didn't realize it was that, you know, the percentages were like what you showed.
I'm glad you found that helpful, Matt. And if you ever want to discuss issues at your job around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and some of the ideas that you can take back to the people that are writing the job descriptions, that are on the search committees, that are hiring and, you know, recognizing employees, I'll be glad to talk to you about that. It's my day job. So I have some tools and resources that might help. So feel free. I'd love to help you out with that.
Hey, Kathryn, I'm going to put my email in chat if you want to send me. And Matt, I don't know that we have you on our distro, but we can get this to you too. If you wouldn't mind, so that I could share this out as a just kind of meeting follow up for those who weren't able to join us. Your contact info and the presentation.
Okay. Not a problem.
But Matt, you said something that made me think, which is in terms of like hiring, and I think it applies to our club too, because one thing that I've noticed in my team in particular is they have a tendency to hire people that they've worked with previously, which is okay, sure, you know this person, you know how they work. But if you're coming from a place that's not terribly diverse in previous situations, it kind of follows you. And I was thinking about that, and then thinking about how when we look at our clubs, I think ours is representative of that in a way too, that we, you know, we're kind of recruiting our friends, which is I think why we have the kind of gender and age skew that we do. But then when you think of, you know, other clubs too, I think they're in that same boat of, you know, you're kind of recruiting the people that you're around. And when those people are not a very diverse pool to begin with, it's kind of a cycle that's hard to break of sorts if you're not intentional about changing it.
You're correct. On the Rotary website, it says that most of our new members are introduced to the club through a friend or a colleague. So if you don't make an intentional effort to think outside of your immediate friends circle or your colleague circle, you will get more of the same. And that's kind of the way it works. One concept, and Matt, this may interest you a little bit since you brought in the corporate element, and of course, in tech, they have stopped asking for salary verification on new jobs, and everyone wonders why. Well, if we can concede that women and other minorities have been marginalized and our salaries have not been up to par with males, we would be perpetuating that if every new job you apply for, rather than them paying you based on the requirements of the job, if they were basing your new salary on your old salary, those inequities would never go away. So that's an equity issue. That's one of those policies or procedures that you have to eliminate in order to start to achieve equity in hiring and in salaries. So that's just one example of the systemic ways that you know, inequities can persist with sameness, as well as using past experiences as an indicator of future opportunities.
Kathryn, how would you respond to your first slide, the question on your first slide? How would you respond to someone who says that a request to celebrate diversity necessitates the compromise of one's religious beliefs?
that to celebrate does automatically do that. I don't know. I think we can celebrate our children as being wonderful. If you are a male and you have a daughter, you can celebrate that you have a daughter. That doesn't mean you want to be a girl. So we can celebrate things that we don't want to become. And I think the word celebrate, I think people think of the Pride Day celebration where everybody goes down the street in hot pants with pom-poms. And I think celebrating is just realizing how great it is to learn about new people and new things and new cultures and new foods and new holidays. So celebrating is, to me, another word for taking advantage of, if you will.
You know, we had a conversation about 2 months ago, and it was when we were trying to come up with the mission statement for our DEI group. And one of the concerns was that some of the older members, legacy members, if you were, view certain words that are being used for DEI as code words. And celebrate is one of them, I think, in their mind, code words. And so what we did as a committee, as a group, small committee, was to break down these definitions, that we didn't have to use the words diversity, inclusion, equity to get what we were trying to accomplish, which was to show respect for everyone, to be respectful of people who come to Rotary. Okay. The word respect is something that all Rotarians can agree with. And so by using language, words differently to show what we mean, we can gain acceptance. And so if we think that someone's going to treat the word celebrate as a code word, we can simply say, what we mean is to be respectful, just to be respectful to someone who is different. That's all. That's all we're asking. Be respectful, be courteous, polite. And we had one very conservative member, very outspoken member, a very fine man from my Rotary Club who appeared in our committee. He liked the mission statement that we had written. It worked for him. It was the same concepts. Nothing had really changed in substance, but the words were different, and they were words that he could accept. They were concepts he could accept. So I thought we were being successful in moving ourselves forward. So, I mean, did you see it the same way, or how did you see it?
Absolutely. One of the things we talked about was that we're here to build bridges. We're not here to perpetuate stereotypes or make people feel uncomfortable. So there was a willingness overall to remove any words that were divisive, because that's not our intention. We want people to understand and embrace these concepts. And if there is a word like diversity, we can change the word to acknowledging, respecting differences. Instead of inclusion, having an inclusive environment, we can say a welcoming and warm environment. So there are other words that get at the same words of DEI. And so I think it was a very smart pivot for our club, for our DEI committee to recognize that and really shift our mission statement to that. That was a win.
Just frame DEI that it's just Southern hospitality on steroids.
Southern hospitality on steroids.
I feel like I've seen it in the past where I've heard organizations or people talk about wanting more diversity, but it's more of a buzzword for, I think, some organizations than an actual objective, because anything that makes them slightly uncomfortable, and I think to accept diversity is to accept ideas that might, or accept things that are different, and that it comes with a certain degree of uncomfortable. And so I've seen it where it's been a lot of talk, but not a lot of follow through, where I've been the token diversity before, where it's like I'm a box they can check, and they're like, now we're diverse. But again, like you said, without the inclusion and the equity, that becomes quickly meaningless, because that's not really achieving what should be the objective. Do you find that, and have you seen that in organizations? Is that like something that is kind of more unique to my experience, or yeah, how do you?
That is very common. I think that people were stirred by the George Floyd incident, and there were a lot of conversations around diversity, and everybody wants diversity. But like you said, they weren't really prepared for the inclusion, and they certainly weren't prepared for the equity. When people are there and they are in an inclusive environment, and then they find out that the same person doing their job, another person doing the same job, is making $50,000 more than them. You have to remove those barriers in order for people to feel that they belong. Otherwise, you perpetuate in-group dynamics and out-group dynamics. So there has been a lot of talk. People don't really know what to do to attract. So I work at A&M, and the first place we start is recruiting. We look at where we're advertising our jobs. And recently we've expanded to other diverse job sites, like Diverse Issues in Higher Education, not just the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is a 100-year-old publication that is probably not diverse. You start with how you word your job description. Words like, we need a strong leader. Well, that sounds like it's a position for a male. So really looking and ticking away at some of those systemic, long-standing inequities. And a lot of organizations just aren't ready to change the status quo. If so, women would make the same amount of money as men do. And we've been working on that for a long time. Someone quoted a statistic, and I must admit, I did not look it up for myself, but I love it. It says that there are more Fortune 500 CEOs named John than there are women CEOs. And we've been working at this gender parity equality issue for a very long time. And we still haven't. We've made progress, absolutely made progress, but we're still not there. And I would say with diversity, especially when we're talking about racial, religious, political, all of those dimensions of diversity, I think we have an even longer way to go. But your observations are correct. Organizations want diversity, but they have no idea what to do with us when we get there.
You know what I've realized a lot of times, even these words, diversity, inclusion, equality, you know, gender, whatever, they become buzzwords for some people, that we're going to become this ultra brainwash type of situation. You know, how do you even overcome just the words of what they are? You know, the DEI is a big red flag for some people alone. It's a very interesting thing. How do you even get past that for some?
Well, like Wes was saying, as far as our district DEI committee, we changed the words. If people don't like the word diversity, we use the word differences. If people don't like inclusive culture, we substitute it for welcoming environment. So we find ways to find common ground on the things we can agree on. We can all agree on the 4-way test. So we find a place where we all agree, and then we start from there.
Sure. And another thing too is, it seems certain clubs that I've been to, well, Rotary's a secular organization, right? It's about how can you do the 4-way test? How good of a Rotarian are you? Will you pay your dues? You know, that's more important in some senses than who are you sleeping with? What's your religious organization? You know, do you have 2.5 kids and a golden retriever? So it's just interesting. How do you even fix that? If tell people it's not a religious organization, it's a secular organization.
I'll hesitate to say this, and the only reason I'll say this is because Mike Groom said this, and I think Wes, you agreed. Sometimes you have to get the right people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus.
That's fair. If That's 100%. If anyone else has any other questions, we are at time. If you have any questions, if y'all will drop them in the chat, and then Delane, if you'll copy those and then share those with Kathryn, and then Kathryn, when you send Delane back your presentation, if you can just answer those questions, and then she'll send it out to the club.
Okay.
Do y'all have a schedule of when y'all's DEI meetings are? We always ask Wes to give us any updates at our board meetings, but if y'all have like set ones, we would love to be able to hop on some of those. So if you'll also send those to Delane.
Okay, we meet the first Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock via Zoom. So I will share those details, and Wes, feel free to share them with your club as well. The interesting thing is we don't have a lot of diversity on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So I would welcome any participation, whether you can be a standing member or if you'll just raise your hand to help us advance some of these principles by talking about how important it is. Whatever contribution, just to listen in, I would be more than happy to have you join. And Wes, I did see your question in the chat. What are 3 things that you can do to promote diversity? Try to focus on differences, not sameness. Get out of your comfort zone and invite people that aren't in your everyday circle. And number 3, recognize the value of diversity and inclusion and do it.
Our next meeting is October the 6th, so this Thursday at 6
It's
o'clock.
Thursday.
Everybody's
Thursday.
invited, Thursday.
6 o'clock.
Awesome.
So I'll make sure that I can provide Delane that information as well.
Yeah.
I'll
think that was
try to
the
join. Oh, sorry.
same.
Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think a lot of our members have an interest in sitting in on that meeting, if whether it's standing members or just hopping in. But yeah, I think that was a great way to end your DI with those 3 things that we can really take away. So if you all come off mute, we'll do our 4-way test, and then y'all can kind of hang around if you have time, and you can ask Kathryn any more questions. But again, just drop those in the chat. So the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair
to
all concerned?
Third, will it
Will it
build
goodwill
and better
and
better
friendships?
friendships?
And fourth, will
Will
it
it
be
be
beneficial
beneficial
to
to all
all
concerned?
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys have a great week. 2 weeks, since we will have an off week next week. And I hope that some of us can join Kathryn's meeting on Thursday. So if you have to go,
Okay,
go on. But
preview 2 weeks social meeting. We're going to do trivia contest. We're going to have 3 teams, but 1 winner. Okay. So bring your game.
That the escape room was a lot of fun. So Wes, make sure I get the link to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would love to have you join us.
Yeah.
That would
Well,
be
she's
fun.
that'd be done.
What? Invite your sisters.
that
You
was-
can be a team together. There you go. The 3. There you go.
Yeah,
The 3 amigos.
I will definitely.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure
course.
meeting
Thank
and
you for
interacting with
coming.
all of you. And
Mhm.
I will see you guys again. I may join your club. I like it a lot.
Come on.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
love
Good
it.
night, everybody.
Great.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Good night, y'all.
Goodbye.
Bye, Delene.